People of faith, let's take another walk. Let's talk on the subject of how the blessing runs out or how it stops. The only way that the blessing can stop if the thief came in and stole your focus, stole the individual's focus. What that means is to obtain the blessing, you was focused on one thing. You was focused on humility. Or humility had your attention to put you in a position to lead you to where the blessing was. Right? So, at some point, the opposition came in. We would call it the thief. Satan came in and implemented another suggestion. The suggestion that he implemented was that you don't have to be humble. You could be self-righteous. In other words, you could become a God in your own eyes. That means God will ask you to do something and you will say, well, I don't have to do it that way because you know better, right? That's the very moment that you lose the blessing. And what I mean by that is that the very voice of God is the blessing. So a person may say, well, I can hear God all the time. Well, then if you can hear God all the time, there's no reason for you to be without the blessing. There's no reason for you to be without the blessing. The blessing is not an individual substance or individual positioning, or we would call that the favor, whatever. It is not based upon abundance. Well, let's say it this way. The blessing is not based upon a singularity. It's not like the abundance of God is based upon one. It's not in quantity, but it is based upon obedience. So if the person's not going to be obedient, that means that they don't need to listen to God. At that point, they become a rival with God. So, but the very one that led them to where the blessing was, because the blessing was who He is, they can no longer be attached to the blessing because they can't hear the blessing. So the blessing can't show them how to receive it, what to do with it, whatever, where to go get it. So they become separated from the blessing. So now they are an enemy towards the blessing. So this is how the thief takes away something that God has given us. Let's say that God bless you with a brand new house or a car. Or that you asking God for something and you can't seem to get it. Because the thief has your attention. He has your focus. He has your focus on you being your own God. And a way that he can do that, other than a suggestion, well, normally through a suggestion, if it's not a suggestion to give up the blessing, it's a suggestion to keep you away from the blessing. And another way that he can do is have you to hold on to hurt, or hold on to something of your standard. Hold up to something that's considered beneath your standard. This is where the arrogance comes in at. The enemy made me, personally, he made me a thief. Oh, no, well, now let me say it this way. The enemy came and stole the blessing from me by suggesting that I focus on man. In other words, look what Satan is an accuser of the brethren. He don't stop just by presenting that to God. He brings that to us too as well, or one another, so we could fight against one another. The scripture says that this is not a flesh and blood fight. It's a spiritual fight. But if the enemy can get us to focus on the outside, we'll be blindsided from what's coming. So our foresight will become what? A hindsight. We see it like the aftermath because we're focused on the natural versus the supernatural or the spirit realm. So the enemy came in with me, and let's say like if I had a neighbor that said something that was beneath the standard of love, right? The enemy said like, well, look what they did towards you. So the point of him saying that to me was to get me off the focus of love, which will be God, and it will be me listening to God's voice. The purpose of him doing what he did was to get me to get off the focus of God, which is the focus of God is God's voice, right? It's not like looking at a cross and seeing Jesus on it. The focus of God is basically being able to hear his voice. If the scripture says, seek God early while he may be found. In other words, if you don't seek him early, you don't get connected to his voice. Because throughout the day, there's going to be problems. And which problems is basically what? A voice of another. When we are inside God, there are no problems. Because you are inside possibility. It becomes impossible when you are away from God. This is where fear is. So if the enemy can get us to be distant from God's voice, or to be distracted from God's voice, which in other words, the way he can do it is to be focused on the natural. The only way he can get you to be focused off of God, because God is spirit, is to get you to focus on something that's natural. So he'd take a situation like I just suggest, like I just said as an example, he'd take like a neighbor. You have a standard of what love is, right? Love is where you're putting your submission towards. That's so like you agree to submit to God. So like you agree that God is love. So you agree to submit that love is the most high in your life. So the enemy wants to separate you from that. Why? Because the enemy wants he wants to be the number one God. And the only way he can be number one God is to have you to be convinced that you're God. And in that you'll be serving him. See how that works? He is separated from God. So the only way he can be God is to get us to separate from God, which would be up under him. He rules that reality of separation from God. He rules that. So everything that's of the natural, that's all his. Because it's all separation from God. It has death attached, which means it has a starting point and an ending point. But with God, everything is eternal. It doesn't have an ending or beginning, because the ending is the beginning. It's one of the same. It doesn't have an end point. It's without flaw. So going back to this, the enemy, the only way that the blessing of God, only way a person cannot obtain the blessing, or the blessing runs out or fades or whatever, is because the thief came in and he stole the focus. In other words, humility was not an option, or we can say being self-righteousness, or not self-righteousness, we could say being a God in your own eyes was the option, and the person took it. That's the only way that the thief can come in and take it, because that's the only way he can get you into the natural. With that being said, my people of faith, you are the blessed. Let's be the blessing. Let's keep walking.